This is our area of a composite figure lesson. I did this one as a video so that way each of you could work through it at your own pace. Some are going to need more help, some of you are going to naturally kind of know how to attack these, but let's go ahead and get started. So the big idea is that to find the area of a composite figure, or kind of a big ugly figure that's made up of lots of parts, we're going to break it down into pieces, into things that we know how to find the area of. So think rectangles, triangles, parallelograms, trapezoids. Then we put those pieces back together. We add those individual areas back together in order to find the area of the whole shape. So start with our first one here. You can kind of look at it. It naturally kind of shows you that, hey, if I were to slice it right along here, I would have a triangle and then I would have a semicircle. So a good habit to get into is just sketch out each of those two shapes separately. And more importantly, put the right measurements on it. So this one's a triangle. To find the area of a triangle, I know I want to do base times height, but then I got to divide by 2. So first I need my base. Well, that's my 11. And then I need the height of my triangle. Remember, always look for that right angle. Well, this measurement going up is this piece right here. That's my 6 meters. So to find my area, I do 6 times 11 divided by 2. 6 times 11 is 66. Divided by 2 is 33. We're dealing in meters, so meters squared. That's the area of just my first shape. Now we look at the second shape. So I can draw my semicircle down here. And really I only know one measurement. This whole distance across is 6 meters. Well, if you remember, the whole distance across is your diameter. But to find area for a triangle, we want to do pi times the radius squared. So we need to know the radius. Well, the radius is just half of the diameter. So if the diameter is 6, my radius is 3 meters. So I plug that in. Pi, or 3.14, times 3 squared, my radius squared. That one I'll type into my calculator and get 28.26 meters squared, but that's for the whole circle. I only want half of the circle, so then remember to divide by 2, or some of you may have already divided by 2 up here. We divide by 2, and just the half circle is going to be 14.13 meters squared. Then put it back together. Add together our two areas to find the area of the whole shape. So in this case, 33 plus 14.13 is going to be 47.13 or 47.1 meters squared. So start by kind of breaking it down into separate shapes. So here was shape 2. We found the area of each one of them and then put the two pieces back together. Next one. Hopefully this one you can kind of see that it's really just two rectangles. So think of it as we have one big rectangle, and then we have a smaller rectangle that's basically a hole in the middle of it. We're missing this piece. So this time, instead of finding the two areas and adding them together, in this case this piece is missing, so we're going to subtract it away. So start with the big shape. It's got a base of 42, a height of 25. So we do 42 times 25. And we get an area of 1,050 meters squared. Then we do the small shape on the inside. It's got a base of 22, a height of 20. So 22 times 20. That's going to give me 440 meters squared. But I always like to use this as an example of, imagine this was your birthday cake. You have this big birthday cake, and then some rude person comes and cuts a huge chunk out of the middle of your cake. Clearly you've lost some of that cake. They've taken it away, meaning we want to subtract those two pieces from each other. So we do 1,050 minus 440, and we get a difference of 610 meters squared. That's the area of the blue leftover region. Next one. Now we're starting to get a little bit uglier for our shapes here. Got to be a little bit more creative with it. So there's a couple ways of tackling this one, but here's my suggestion. What if we sliced it straight across here? Now I know they'd put in that dashed line, but that's just so they could show the height of 16. That doesn't mean I have to divide it there. I like to think of it as one big rectangle and then a smaller triangle up top. So let's focus on the rectangle first, and then we'll come back to our triangle. So again, if it helps, sketch it out. We got a big rectangle. We need to know its base and its height. Well, the base is this 24 yards. The height is 8 yards. To find the area, I just do base times height for a rectangle. So 24 times 8 is 192. We're dealing in yards, so it'd be yards squared. That's the area of the big rectangular bottom. Now we have to focus on the triangle. So that's shape 2. Now, this one we're going to have to be a little bit more careful of because none of the measurements are there that I want, but we can go find them all. So let's start with the base of our triangle. We know that this part here is 6 yards. We know that this part here is 6 yards. And we know the whole thing is 12. So what we want to know is 6 plus what plus 6 gives me 24. Well, 6 plus 6 is 12. Subtract that away from 24 and we find out that the base of that triangle is 12 yards. Because 6 plus 12 plus 6 gives us 24. Now we got to find the height of our triangle. So we want to find this distance going up. We know the whole thing, top to bottom, is 16. We know that just this piece from here to here is 8. We want to know this piece going up to the top. We want to know this height. Well, if the whole thing is 16 and this piece is 8, we just subtract them. 16 minus 8 means this one has a height of 8 as well. So I can draw that in over here. My height is going to be 8 yards. For some of you, that's going to be easier to find. For others of us, that'll be a little bit of a struggle to find those measurements, but that's okay. To find area for a triangle, I just do base times height, but don't forget that divide by 2. 12 times 8 is 96, divided by 2 is 48. We're dealing in yards, so it's going to be yards squared. And then we add the two of them back together. We put those two parts together, and we get 240 yards squared. So we found the area of the big rectangle, we found the area of the smaller triangle, and then we put those two pieces back together. One last one. This one's our ugliest of the pieces, but if we take it piece by piece, we can handle this one. A good way to slice it is always slice off the round parts or the circular parts by itself. So let's focus on this part up here first. It's just a semicircle. We want to find area, so we need to know the radius. Luckily, they told us the radius, the distance from the middle out to the edge, is 3 yards. So to find the area of a semicircle, area is equal to pi times the radius squared, but then don't forget that divided by 2. So for this one, we're going to do 3.14 pi times 3 squared divided by 2. And that gives me 14.13 yards squared. Remember, area is always squared. I think it's the exact same numbers we had from earlier on in the problem. But now let's look at shape number 2. So what if I cut it off right here, but focus on this bottom portion? Oops, sorry, that's a really bad line. I think I'd be able to trace a little bit better here. Okay, now this shape looks a little ugly, but we don't need to do anything extra with it, because really all it is it's a trapezoid. To find the area of a trapezoid, we need to know our two bases. Well, base 1 is 10 yards. But what about base 2? I know that this little piece is 3, but I want the whole thing going all the way across. Well, if this piece is 3, that means the whole thing is going to be 6 yards. And then we know our height is 8. So I can jot that one in here too. But by drawing that out, it can really help you focus on what information do I have and what do I need to do with it. So now we find our area. Remember, our formula is base 1 plus base 2 times the height, and then divided by 2. So base 1 plus base 2 times the height divided by 2. 10 plus 6 is 16 times 8 divided by 2. Well, I know that if I were to do that math, I would get an answer of 64 yards squared. Last step, don't forget to put the pieces back together. Add 14.13 plus 64, and that's going to give us an overall area of 78.13 yards squared. So break it down into pieces. Make sure you have the appropriate measurements for each one of them, and then find each of those areas before you put it back together. So now it's your turn to do the problems on the back of the page. There's some easier ones, there's some more challenging ones, but see me if you need some help.